The next Minnesota Wild superstar has been revealed. Zeev Buium has moved in to the number 1 top prospect spot for the Minnesota Wild and has also moved this team to number 2 overall. I'm going to be talking about the reasons why he did move them and some very interesting looks at what he's going to do for the Minnesota Wild once he comes over to the big leagues here in this video. Before we get into it though, a brand new channel here covering everything Minnesota Wild related from this season, the draft, free agency, the trade deadline, you name it. We're going to be covering all of that here on this channel. So if you're looking for a spot for all of your Minnesota Wild news, hit the sub button down below. But without any further ado, let's get into our first little screenshot here, going over Zeev Buium in this case and looking at where he's ranking of the top 100 prospects currently drafted in the NHL. So number 1, Ivan Demidov from the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, that was a very tough one to kind of surpass in these situations. We know how good he's been, especially with all the highlights as of late, but he's the only one in number 1, tier 1, sorry. In tier 2, Zeev Buium has found him spot in the first spot of that and second overall in the top 100 drafted prospects in the NHL, and rightfully so. The way that Zeev Buium has been playing, not just as of late, but since he's been drafted by the Minnesota Wild in Denver with Team USA, everything, he has been really showing that a lot of people, a lot of teams have made a mistake by not drafting him in the NHL draft. Obviously, the Minnesota Wild moved up to take him at number 12 overall, and rightfully so, as he's really been making highlights everywhere that he's possibly been able to. And the Minnesota Wild have got themselves a prospect, and the new number 1 for this team is Zeev Buium, as well as moving into the number 2 spot overall in the NHL. The Minnesota Wild, because of Zeev Buium. He's helped them move that spot and really move forward this prospect pool that's been really good for quite a long time, but just goes to show how the Minnesota Wild scouts and everything is bringing it all together to continue making this prospect pool one of the best in the NHL. But as we kind of move on to Zeev's stats, I think the stats say what they need to for themselves. When we're looking at him in Team USA, looking at Denver, and even the National Development Program a few years ago, he has been consistently going over or around point per game as a defenseman. No matter where he's been, his offensive talent, his defensive talent have all spoken for themselves. And really has shown why he is bound to be the next superstar defenseman in Minnesota. And of course, we have so many solid defensemen. We know Brock Faber, Carson Lambos, a few that are very, very young, to name a few that are going to be big pieces of this future. But a guy like Zeev Buium, who has that potential to be one of the best in the NHL. Some names like Cale Makar have been thrown around for a comparison. But when we look at Zeev, 50 points in 42 games with Denver in the year 1, 32 and 26 this season, and then the USA, 6 points in 7 games, 5 points in 7 games, both in the World Junior Championship, and once again, just goes to kind of highlight how important he is to any team that he's on. The USA team, very, very deep. We've been able to see that year in and year out, how deep this team has been over the past few years, and how deep that team will continue to be, and even having their defense, in this case, Zeev Buium, be a big aspect of their production on the offense and the defense is really integral to what the Minnesota Wild get to see from him early on in the stages of not being on the Wild team yet, but preparing to be later on in the season as we do progress out of the college season soon enough and to the NHL playoff race. And that will be a great addition for the Minnesota Wild if they do continue to keep the plan as to what it is right now and bring Zeev up to the big squad when his contract, or I should say his schooling ends, and get that contract signed with the Minnesota Wild. But as we kind of do move on as well, this is what the top 15 prospects from the Minnesota Wild, this is what Scott Wheeler had to say, and Zeev is number 1. Scott Wheeler also made the list of having him on the 100 top NHL player prospects. So we're looking at from Wheeler here. Buium has put together one of the best seasons by a teenage defenseman in modern college hockey history. Has been part of big 2 gold medal winning World Junior teams, and is having another excellent sophomore season that's continued to solidify his status as one of the top defensive prospects in the NHL. And I think the highlight from this quote here from Scott Wheeler is that he's going to be one of the top defensive prospects in the NHL, if not already. We know he's one of the top, but soon certainly has to be at least moved into maybe the number 1 spot. Of course, drafted right behind Artem Levshinov, who was really the only comparable that we saw that, was certainly going to go before, but looking at it now, you can go back on it and make a redraft of either way, being able to pick either of the 2 defensemen, but Zeev has really put on a spectacular season so far this year, and not even done yet. We're still continuing to see how that's going to progress into, the NHL level and whatnot. And although he's not the biggest defenseman of all time, still very strong on his feet, very, strong on his feet, strong with the hands, very smart with his game, keeping everything safe. Don't risk too much, but he knows when to be able to do that, which is, I think, is exactly what an NHL defenseman needs to have at this level, and especially coming up. You can't be scared, and that's what we really saw with Brock Faber coming into his first NHL season, playing 25, 30 minutes a game, which was, quite a big ask for a guy like that, and having his experience as a rookie come into this and produce that over to Zeev, certainly something that is going to very well fit into the scheme of the Minnesota Wild. But as we do kind of look at this as well, we have some strength and improvement areas here, continuing from this article. And although he's only 6 foot 183, not the biggest guy, still a lot of room to grow yet, as he is only 19. The strengths are Buium is a smart puck-moving defenseman with strong two-way game. His vision and passing ability allow him to effectively start the transition from defense to offense. He is comfortable in all situations, capable of playing both the power play and penalty kill, and shows good positional awareness in his zone. And, of course, when we look at the power play and penalty kill, another two aspects of just being able to add to your production, add to your game, and be a very big asset for the Minnesota Wild. We see a bit of a slump recently, and, of course, that's going to happen, but when we do want to see some games that you need to win, Zeev will be eventually a major part of these types of games that, when there's a slump happening, you need your superstars to step up. Of course, Kirill Kaprizov on IR for the longest time LTIR, and now having Zeev, eventually, and it's going to be exciting to see him into this lineup, eventually get put into this lineup and be a full-time. He's going to be another layer of just incredible skill that the Wild are going to show off. And although there are a lot of strength, there's still going to be some room for improvement, and that's just about any NHL player. There's no one that's perfect in the NHL. So when you're having a little small list of areas of improvement like this is a very good thing to show from a 19-year-old. And Buium needs to work on his physicality, especially the board plays and net front battle situations. Adding strength and development, more assertiveness to his defensive play will help him handle the rigors of the NHL, which is, of course, that's with any short, small player, not even necessarily short, but smaller-sized player. It's going to be a big ask, to get him in front of the net. Do, a lot more defensive style of skill, because we know Zeev is very, very good on both sides of the puck, but the defensive area is still going to be one that the Wild have locked down, and many other defensive defensemen. Allowing Zeev to be able to do both sides of the ice is going to certainly add to how much value he has to this Minnesota Wild team. But once again, as we go in, we now have another breakdown of how he has made himself into this number 2 prospect. And bear with me here, this is a pretty long one, but he's a plus level skater and handler who plays an extremely involved game in all 3 zones, whether that's activating the rush off the point, shaking pressure, or exits across/off the blue line, which does extraordinarily well, and making opposing players miss, working in and out of give-and-goes, or playing tight gaps against the rush. He's a very busy player on both sides of the puck, and he gets in and out of transitions and footwork so quickly that he can play that style. When he's dialed in, applying pressure on and off the puck, and uses his feet to skating to influence play, he can really impact the game in a lot of ways and take over both offensively with the activation and evasiveness in the offensive zone, and defensively with his ability to swallow up top players. And, we're seeing some players like that now in the NHL, but really we're seeing a lot of offensive defensemen. A lot of these smaller guys really be only one-dimensional. Of course, with a few anomalies, but for the majority, a lot of these smaller guys are just solely offense. And having Zeev have this production already, something that I really cannot wait to see at the NHL level. Of course, to be able to get a good idea of it, first of all, but then being able to see him really just develop into a much stronger and, better defenseman, more than he already is. And that's bound to happen, and hopefully the Wild can really make that into a very good plan going forward with how busy this defense is. And speaking of how busy the defense is, we kind of look at the defensive depth chart right now. And of course, when we're looking at the NHL players right now, the guys in the NHL club, we have seen those guys for quite some time. And, Brock Faber, the most recent addition to this team, I guess, realistically, on the rookie side of things. But we can't forget Zeev Buium, Carson Lambos, David Jiricek, who they also recently acquired from the Columbus Blue Jackets. When these guys really start to get their age up, start to, I'm acting like getting your age up is something that they can do physically, just once they get older, once they get more experience, and once some of these older guys start to move out, they have a, I don't want to say secured spot, because still, no spot is given. The spot still has to be earned, but they've really been able to show that this is going to be a very, very, very big force on defense in the rest of the NHL for quite some time. And, we see the age on those, well, in this case, second and third line, although these are not the current lines. John Merrill, Zach Bogosian, Jonas Brodin, and Jared Spurgeon, all getting up there in age. And Jake Middleton, 29 as well, still not the oldest, but certainly getting up there in age. But when we look at the other guys I've mentioned, Zeev, Carson, and David, 19, 22, 21, and 22 for Brock Faber as well. So we're in a very good spot here defensively. But I think that the fact that Zeev Buium is really producing at an insane level, playing at an insane level, defending at an insane level is something that the Wild are going to have to work into the roster soon enough rather than later, just to get some experience in and get some games going, because everybody wants to see Zeev at the NHL level. But let me know what you think about this. I'm very excited to see, once again, how Zeev gets up and plays in the NHL level, and it still will take some time, but we know that once we get there, we're ready to go. This will be a very exciting time. So that's all I got in this video. Remember, subscribe to the channel if you're looking for any bit of Minnesota Wild news. I'll have it all here. A lot more videos coming now, especially over the Four Nations, when we're going to be getting a lot of these rumors, trade reports, what's going to happen. Billy G there, and GM of the U.S. team, hopefully getting some good scouting opportunities on some of these guys. So let me know what you think about Zeev here first, but also let me know what kind of trades you may want to see from the Minnesota Wild, and we can kind of go from there on the channel. But like I said, that's all I got. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.